we now turn to a powerful intersection of folklore, historiography and indigenous knowledge systems seen through the lens of Rajasthan's oral traditions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Komal Agarwal, Assistant Professor in the Department of English at Shaheed Bhagat Singh College, Delhi University. Dr. Agarwal earned her doctorate from the Center for English Studies at JNU in 2019. Her scholarly interests span a rich range from epic and popular versions of the Mahabharata to Indian classical literature and aesthetics, and from folk and popular cultures to gender studies and translation studies. In addition to her academic pursuits, she is also an active environmentalist and serves as the co-convener of Harit Kram, the Environment Society at her college. Today she brings us a fascinating paper that explores Rajasthan's oral folk history as a form of alternate nationalist historiography through the pioneering work of folklorist Komal Kothari. The title of her paper is Documenting the Oral History of Rajasthan as Alternate Nationalist Historiography, a study of Komal Kothari's indigenous method of preserving and perpetuating folklore. Dr. Komal Agarwal. Of course. Just need to click this.
Namaste everybody, Khamba Gani. So Dimple ji has already talked about the topic of my presentation. Before I begin, however, I would really like to put on record my gratitude for a platform like Indica, where we can present without any fear, you know, as Tagore said, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. So thank you so much, Paturi ji, and everybody else involved with Indica. Moving on to my first slide. You know, initially this paper was planned as a comparative study of how colonialists have imagined and documented Rajasthan and how Komal Kothari has documented Rajasthan post-independence. However, on the guidance of Nagaraj Paturi Garu, I actually made my paper on Komal Kothari, and I'm so glad for the guidance because it's only then that I could really arrive at this hypothesis. So colonial folklorists have tended to homogenize India. You know, Sadhana Nathani, a sociologist from JNU, she actually says, in so doing, you know, India is very varied, you know, that goes without saying. India has a very rich and varied culture. There are lots of people who have said every 50 kilometers you travel in the country, the dialect, the food, the songs, everything changes. So what the colonialists have ended up doing is they have homogenized these differences. They have tried to standardize their studies. In the end, almost leading to the creation of a folklore India. And this is a phrase that I've borrowed from Nathani. However, as Vikramjit Banerjee ji was also talking about in his presentation, there is a lot of our history that's not written, that's not documented. In fact, probably that is something that acquires a lion's share of our history. So my paper is basically going to be about the oral history, the oral folklorist history, something that does not get documented, but at least in the context of Rajasthan. You know, I'm very glad that I did my MPhil work on Rajasthani folk songs, and I chanced upon the work of Komal Kothari. And I visited Rupayan Sansthan, about which I'll be talking later. So, in fact, you know, there's a particular thing that's very unpalatable to academic discourses about the kind of work that Komal Kothari did. So because he was a folklorist, because he was somebody who documented the oral traditions, he is somebody who never really wrote down a lot. You know, he has very few articles, maybe 1 or 2 books, but an anthropologist called Rustam Bharucha, he interviewed Komal Kothari ji for over 800 hours, and he published a book called Rajasthan and Oral History, Conversations with Komal Kothari. So, you know, Bharucha spent so much time with Komal Da, and he actually talks about how they never talked on a specific topic. He had so much to talk about. He did 50 years of on-ground research. So he had so much to talk about, and everything that he talked about had so many layers that they never really focused on a particular topic. And when Bharucha went through the transcripts of the recordings, you know, he was bewildered. In the first attempt, he was bewildered. He didn't know what to do with the material. Will he even be able to like categorize it and publish it as a book? But then he revisited the material, and by this time he had also spent a lot of more time with Kothari. So now he could see the patterns. So, Bharucha says, if we go by the rules of theoretical correctedness, academic discourses, then Komalda does not appear to be an academician, whatever narrative he says, it will probably not pass off as history. But then again, there are various versions of history that need to be studied, as my paper is an attempt towards that. Now, very briefly going into the background of Komal Kothari, he was a graduate of Hindi literature, and I'm sure a lot of people in the hall have heard of Vijaydhan Detha. He and Komal Kothari were classmates and great friends, and they both had the background of the Indian freedom struggle. So, post-independence, they really came to believe that history needs to be documented. History is that which is written. And that is how they started off. And Komal Kothari, in fact, began by working on Hindi. In fact, this is again very ironical that in 1947, when Komal Kothari was getting married, he prohibited the singing of any folk song, any Rajasthani folk song, because he thought these songs are meaningless. But in less than a decade, he came around to the realization that Rajasthani language is the identity of Rajasthan, though it does not figure in the 8th schedule, it's not not a recognized constitutional language, but then there is so much of literature, both oral and written, that needs to be documented. So I'll basically be taking you through a very brief journey of Komal Kothari. So it all began with this realization, and Kothari actually organized a performance of Rajasthani folk songs for the first time in 1952-53. Again, he was an oral folklorist, so we might not really have very exact dates, but it's somewhere around that year. And these folk singers were not used to this kind of attention, this was just a way of life for them. And there was also a very interesting system of patronage that goes around in Rajasthan, which I'll be coming to in the later part of my presentation. So the folk musicians, they were very happy with the attention, and Komal Kothari actually saw the impact that this sort of a performance had on the audience, and that is when, in modern day language, he actually got obsessed with the idea of documenting Rajasthani folk culture. So, they started work together. Komal Kothari and Vijaydhan Detha, they started the work together. They established Rupayan Sansthan together. But Vijaydhan Detha always found his calling in documenting the folk tales. He would write down the stories. He would encourage people to write more stories. And Komal Kothari found his calling in folk songs and folk music. So they began two magazines, Prerna and Parampara. And it is actually with the publication of Parampara that started in 1958 that he first came up with the idea of collecting, recording, and documenting Rajasthani folk songs. Now, where do they begin? So, obviously, the urban setup of Jodhpur was not the right place to do that. So Vijaydhan Detha came from the village of Borunda, which is close to Jodhpur again. So they started off there. And, initially they thought they'll not get anything. It was very difficult to get people to remember folk songs or folk tales without a specific context. And there are various accounts of this, but they ended up collecting more than 10,000 folk tales, 13,000 folk songs, and 17,000 riddles only from the village of Borunda alone. And obviously later, when they sat with this material and analyzed it, they realized there were a lot of these songs that had traveled from different parts of Rajasthan. Because what about those women who were from different villages and had married into Borunda? What about those wandering minstrels, the nomads, the Kalbelia tribes, and, I should not be using the word tribes, but the Kalbelias and other communities. So they were overwhelmed with this material. However, when they were researching for these magazines, they also realized there were a lot of folk songs that were written on the colonial rule. A lot of songs that were written against the colonial rule. So they decided that for the second edition of Parampara, they are going to document only these songs that were composed between 1800 and 1900 in Rajasthani, and that had anything to do with the colonial regime. They published a 300-page edition of, second edition of Parampara, and they titled it Gora Hajja. It is a song that was popular in the Bharatpur region. So anyways, moving on, and I'm trying to be quick here. Komal Das joined the Rajasthan Sangeet Natak Academy as its secretary in 1958. he actually took up this role because he thought this position is going to facilitate his collection of folk songs, and he also got very interested in musical instruments, folk musical instruments, a lot of which were vanishing. However, he realized, there are too many constraints to a government job and he can't be sitting around in an office and collecting folk songs. So he very soon resigned and established Rupayan Sansthan with his friend Vijayan Deta. So, eventually they decided to collect anything that you can categorize as folk. Music, songs, instruments, clothes, culinary habits, agricultural practices, basically anything and everything that they could come across in their conversations with the Rajasthani people, especially in the villages. We can also say that for Komal Kothari, this was the calling, folk music, folk songs. Things that otherwise would not find any place in the academic discourse back in the 1950s, okay? So, why Komal Kothari is so special, why his work is monumental, is because he had an insider's perspective, he had an emic perspective to anything that was Rajasthani folk. So, he was somebody who had more inclination towards Rajasthani music, and remember, he did not have any training in music. He had no background in music, nothing to do with Shastriya Sangeet, but when he came across Rajasthani folk music, that is when he started reading up more and trying to know more about Shastriya Sangeet to understand folk music in the backdrop of Shastriya Sangeet. So I'd just like to, quote a small statement from Komal Da. He said, there are two ways in which you can look at the connection of music to folk life. He says, एक संगीत से जीवन को समझने की कोशिश और दूसरा जीवन से संगीत को समझने की कोशिश. So that is the perspective that he adopted. He saw music as the entry point into folk culture of Rajasthan. In fact, his approach towards Rajasthani folk culture was very nuanced and very interrelated. He saw all aspects as being very, very interrelated to each other. So it's not that right from the moment that he started off, he had a clarity of vision and he did not face any roadblocks. He had almost worked for over 10 years and he could not make sense of the diversity that existed in Rajasthan alone. That is when he came across the works of Levi-Strauss, and he tried separating the rational elements of folk from the fantastical elements, and that is when he could see the interconnect. So if you see, he actually drew a food map of Rajasthan, and he divided Rajasthan into these three zones of Bajra, Jawar and maize. And over the course of his research, he discovered how a lot of other aspects of folk life are related to the agricultural or food patterns. So he discovered that there was a prevalence of Rama worship in the Bajra zone, and you can see this is the most prominent zone, the one in green. Krishna worship to the Jawar zone, and Shakti or Shiva worship to the maize zone. In fact, Ashok Vajpayee also in one of his obituaries, he talks about how Komal Kothari had this talent of being able to yoke things together and see things as being interconnected to each other. And, he could talk about agricultural patterns, food crops, the kind of grasses that are grown there, the water, availability of water, the ground table, water table. And he could also talk about all things that you see as art and artistic and so on. And he could actually establish a connect between the two. Eventually, I'll be actually giving you a couple of examples. So, as I said, he had a deep interest in folk instruments, and a lot of instruments were being replaced by very generic instruments like the harmonium. So, you can see this is a Sindhi sarangi here. He actually hunted down the makers of Sindhi sarangis for about 30 years, and he could actually track down somebody only in 1986, and that is when he revived the folk instrument and he distributed these instruments amongst the people who use those instruments, which is the langas. So, for example, there's also the kamaicha. Actually, in this picture, you have the Sindhi sarangi as well as the kamaicha. Kamaicha is prevalent in regions where you have the sevana grass. So we'll just come back to the pictures because I wanted you to have a feel of how this looks. And while I'm at it, all the pictures used in these slides have either been clicked by me between 2010 to 12, or they have been borrowed from the Anna Jharna Desert Museum. So I think I'll continue, and whenever there's a prompt, I'll just go back to my slides. Yeah, so, there's a very important instrument that was actually vanishing. It's called the Kamaicha, and it is only found in regions. Komal Kothari found out that Kamaicha is found in the regions where a grass called the Sevana grass grows. And this does not only pertain to Rajasthan, it pertains to parts of Sindh and Pakistan too. Okay. So I'll just take you back for a minute to the food map. If you can see, the greenish Bajra zone is where you find a lot of Ram worship. The Jawar zone, you find a lot of Krishna worship. And in the tiny maize zone, you have Shiva and Shakti worship. These are patterns that Komalda identified over time. And here in this picture, you have both the Sindhi Sarangi and the Kamaicha. The one on the right is the Kamaicha. So this was vanishing, and he revived it and he distributed it to the musicians that used it. Because every musician community uses a specific instrument or multiple instruments. So this is one popular instance that I wanted you to know. The other was one of his favorite examples that he would narrate to anybody and everybody who would meet him. The Heer Ranjha song. Everybody knows the Heer Ranjha song. But in Rajasthan, the meaning of the Heer Ranjha song is actually associated to the foot and mouth disease that the cattle suffer from. Because Heer was somebody who belonged to the cow herd community. So that is how he saw the, and whenever the, the cattle is suffering from this disease, the Heer Ranjha song was actually sung out to them, and the animals got healed. So, again, in the traditional academic sense, maybe his work is not documented very well, but he had a very different understanding of how he saw Rajasthani folk culture. In fact, we can actually see in the long run how he ended up creating a very alternate nationalist historiography, which, of course, I'll be elaborating on more as we move on. In fact, a lot of people have talked very, very fondly of Komal Kothari, and I'll just quote Acharya, who says, Komal da lok kala marmagyat hi nahi, balki lok chitta ke anveshak the. He could see the soul, the very essence of what is folk in the context of Rajasthan. So, yeah, I was talking about how, it was a very difficult exercise for people when you ask them to sing for you or remember a tale or a riddle for you, just out of context, because everything has to be placed in a certain context, in a certain ritual, in a certain festival, in a certain season, and so on. Also, for all folklorists would agree, there is no single standard unified method to study folklore. I'll just cite a couple of examples from Komalda's methods too. So one of his primary methods was to first live with the community, not just go to them with tape recorders and microphones and scare them away, because, the first Manganiyar, he worked very extensively on two communities, Langas and Manganiyars. The first Manganiyar that he could actually track down ran away from the recording because he thought if he sings to a microphone, he will lose his voice. कैद हो जाती, आवाज कैद हो जाएगी माइक्रोफोन में, and it was their only source of livelihood because they were patronized by a certain community. They were supposed to go and sing on their life cycle events. तो अगर आवाज चली जाएगी तो livelihood चली जाएगी, and these apparatuses, they look very scary. So he had to be hunted down, and the people from Rajasthan Sangeet Natak Academy had to sing before the microphone and demonstrate कि देखो हमारी आवाज नहीं गई है. That is the kind of resistance, difficulties that they faced starting off in the 1950s. So, his primary method was to let the community come at ease, try and understand the kind of work that they are doing, and only, after 3 or 4 days that they are comfortable, they can actually come and sing to the microphone and they'll record them. The other example that you can take up is how he documented the Kalbelias. So he once came across Sarpanch Gulabnath of the Kalbelias, and Kalbelias are nomadic communities. They don't settle down. They're not allowed to settle down, and they won't settle down. So he had some 10 bighas of fallow land. He said, I'm going to give you 5 bighas. Would you settle down here? He said, okay. For some reason, he said, okay. And he lived there for 3 years. and he was the panch, right? He was the sarpanch. So the methodology that he adopted here was, he is not going to pose any questions to them. He and his team members and his people from his office, they will just go and sit there and observe the proceedings, and anything that catches their attention, they'll put it on a chit of paper and drop it in the office. That is how he studied the Kalbelias for over 3 years without the Kalbelias even knowing that they were being studied. So, there is no one standard method, and there are various methods he adopted, and this is basically about how he saw everything being connected, textiles, livestock, crops, priests, bards, modes of worships, rituals. These are some mandanas. On all festivals, we have these floor paintings or wall paintings. He saw everything as being interconnected, and you can't really, so one of the things about the Western approach to studying folklore is you have to dissect, and you have to sort of dissociate things, while that is not the Indian way of life. So enough has been said about that. And he is actually somebody who can be given the sole credit for this nationalization as well as the internationalization of Rajasthani folk. Now, there's this one contribution that I really want to talk about in the context of today's presentation. Rajasthan has a very elaborate system of patronage. So there are the jajmans, the patrons, and some kalakars are associated to them. And these are bound by what a lot of people have referred to as caste groups, some have referred to as hereditary groups. But here with this audience, I can say this is related to the jati arrangement of jatis, okay? Now, Komalda believed that only the Janashrit art forms survived post-independence. A lot of art forms that were actually dependent on the state, Raj Ashrit, wo nahi bache. Because the Raj Ashrit art forms, the purpose was conservation, inko bachana hai. But Janashrit mein, this was a part of their life cycles. तो किसी के birth पे, marriage पे, death पे, मुझे अपने artist को बुला के performance करवानी है. That was a way of my life, which is a participatory framework, which is why a lot of these musician communities that were dependent on common people, commoners, these were farmers, peasants, herdsmen, they survived. So I think that's a very important intervention that Komal Kothari is making when largely what is studied in the context of Rajasthan is the Rajput community, So that's a very important thing to note in mind. And of course, there are so many other fascinating details about women's folk songs and the role of memory and how, every time a folk song is sung, it changes. Some lines get added, some get subtracted, and so on. Now, very interestingly, Komal Kothari also came up with the classification of jatis in the context of folk music. So, Rajasthan approximately has 80 jatis. And Komal Kothari came up with this very ingenious 3-question set. So, if I want to identify if or not the person A belongs to a certain jati, I'm going to pose 3 questions to him. Who is your pujari? Who is your bhat? Bhat is basically a bard. And who is your ganewala or folk singer? If Mr. A ends up answering all of these 3 questions, then he belongs to a jati. If he cannot answer even one of these questions, that means he is not a distinct jati. So that, and he also came up with the discovery that each jati has its own musical instrument. And also, when you talk about something like folk music, folk songs, they are not written in stone. Every time a performer performs, and he anticipates a bigger reward, he will improvise, he'll make it more interesting. So these are a couple of patterns that he noticed. And I'll fail in my presentation if I do not mention how Komal Kothari was a prime example of Lok Sahridayata. He used to consider folk musicians, folk artists, folk singers as his gurus. He said, all the knowledge I have is actually knowledge that I have gained from them. So my prime knowledge, highest knowledge is something that I attribute to them. They are my gurus. I'll just sit at their feet and learn. I think this is again another aspect that folklorists today, anthropologists today need to imbibe in their own research methodology. And in fact, he had this deep empathy with every villager. He said, every villager is a specialist. Every person sitting here is a carrier of their culture. So he was somebody, I just want to narrate one anecdote. He was so fond of talking to people. that even when he was working at the Sangeet Natak Academy in Rajasthan, anybody who would come to meet him in the office, he would end up talking to that person for hours. Till about 5 p.m., which is the official office time, he would only talk to people and no work was done. Now after 5 p.m., people will not pour in because unko lagega ki daftar band ho gaya hai. After 5 p.m. is when he actually started his work, and he would go on till 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. So a lot of his colleagues would say, this is a public contact office. Rajasthan Sangeet Natak Academy को जनसंपर्क कार्यालय बुलाना चाहिए. और कोमल दा के ऑफिस को there's हमदर्द शफा खाना, empathy clinic, something like an empathy clinic, ये पुकारना चाहिए. And of course, सरकारी बाबूज, they must not have really liked all of this, but then they could see the passion in Komal Kothari. So they went along with him. And one more thing, Komal Da really revered folk singers because he thought they are the bearers of our tradition, they are the bearers of our lineage. I have talked about this, so Komal Da also had he had certain giveaways for researchers. He thought commercialization should not come into the picture, and people should document or work on Rajasthani folk or any form of folk for the sake of preservation, and with the spirit. Anyways, now I'm coming to the last part of my presentation. How did he ensure that after he's gone, all that he has documented, although it's not really catalogued well, categorized well, but all of it actually exists and is perpetuated, and the rich vibrancy is not lost. So his first step, of course, was Rupayan Sansthan. This is a picture of the folk instruments that he has collected on the left. This is a picture I took in 2012. And suffice it to say, any researcher who is working on Rajasthani folk cultural aspects, he has to go to Rupayan Sansthan. His work is not complete if he does not make a visit there and consult their library. Rupayan Sansthan has over 80,000 hours of musical recordings. They had a very rich collaboration with the American Institute of Indian Studies, especially in the Department of Ethnomusicology, a term that I do not like to use very much. But you can see a lot of researchers would just go to Komal Kothari and meet him while he was alive, and even now. The second thing that he did was, right from his time at the Sangeet Natak Academy and even later, he conducted these training programs, and even after his death, Kuldeep Kothari, his son, is carrying on the project. So they train young singers, young boys actually, young children of specific communities. They are the ones who provide them the instruments, and they have these workshops where the elders of the community will teach the youngsters. And till now it's working very well, and I've already said how he saved a lot of endangered instruments. The third and favorite part of my presentation as well as my fieldwork was a visit to the Arna Jhanda Museum. Anybody who goes to Jodhpur, please keep a day aside to visit Arna Jhanda Museum. It's a desert museum, and it actually looks like this with a few changes here and there. It's located some 10 kilometers from the main city on a hillock. Now this is a piece of hill that Komal Kothari bought to preserve the village culture of Rajasthan, and the other idea that was behind creating a place like a green belt actually. So they experimented with a lot of methodologies of water harvesting, hit and trial, because he wanted to do something for the birds. He said, जानवरों को तो बहुत लोग चारा डाल देते, लेकिन पक्षियों के लिए कोई कुछ नहीं करता. So, you can see the depth of his understanding of every aspect of folk life. Arna Jhanda Museum is remotely museum-esque. The first and ongoing exhibition that there is an exhibition of brooms. They have about 160 different varieties of brooms that are displayed there. So that's not an abhorrent object, or just an object of daily need. It's something that is deeply linked to the idea of employment, sustainability. They even have a small broom in some community for the puja sthan. भगवान के जगह को साफ करने के लिए भी एक छोटी सी पेंट ब्रश जैसी झाड़ू होती है. So you know, there's a lot that we can actually learn from his model. And his son, you can see the person on the right, in the right picture on the right, he is Kuldeep Kothari, his son, younger son, who is carrying his legacy ahead. And lastly, you know, I've already talked about how one of the losses is he's somebody who never wrote much, but that's something you can expect of a folklorist who was only and largely documenting oral folk forms. Bharucha says, you know, he was not a seer in the traditional sense, nor a scholar in the academic sense. And this is something that I can really back up. He was a one-man institution. Even today, if you are working on anything Rajasthani folk, you must visit the archives, you must get in touch with Kuldeep Kothari, and they are very helpful people, and they are in the process of cataloging a lot of, you know, so there were a lot of these notebooks with notes taken on the field that have not been categorized properly, but I hope that kind of work is done. That's it. These are a couple of sources that I've used in addition to some interviews, telephonic and on-field interviews. Thank you.
Thank you so much.